3 out of 10 budget drivers I tested this year, only 3 actually added distance to my game. The other 7 did nothing. And the part that still bothers me is that the reason has almost nothing to do with the head, the badge, or the price on the box. I know that now, but I spent the better part of 30 years believing the exact opposite, handing over my credit card every single spring like it was a religion. Here's what I'm going to prove to you before this is over. Every legal driver made since about 2008 has the same maximum ball speed off the center of the face. The same, a $99 driver and a $600 driver hit the same ceiling when you catch it clean. There's a documented number behind that, a rule most golfers over 50 have never heard, and once you know it, you'll never overpay again. And the best part is this works even if you never buy another club, because the biggest fix I found lives in the driver already sitting in your bag right now. Let me take you back to how I found out. It was a Tuesday in the fall 2 years ago. I was standing on the range at my home course with a brand new driver. I'd waited 3 months to buy the top of the line, the one every tour pro on television was suddenly holding. I hit it beside my old gamer, the one I'd retired to the garage. Same ball, same swing, same launch monitor I'd rented for the afternoon. And when the numbers came up side by side, my carry distance was 2 yards longer with the new one. 2 yards. For $450 more than I paid for the old one 4 years earlier. I stood there feeling something I hadn't let myself feel in decades of buying drivers. I felt like a mark. That's where the story really starts. Because 2 yards is inside the margin of error. 2 yards is the difference between a warm afternoon and a cool one. 2 yards is nothing. And yet I had spent, over the years, I actually added it up later, more than $11,000 chasing yards. I was never going to get from the head of a golf club. I want you to understand I'm not some outsider throwing rocks. I was the truest believer you ever met. I pre-ordered. I read every launch article. I told my buddies the new face technology was a game changer, and I believed every word coming out of my own mouth. So that Tuesday, I decided to do something I'd never done. Instead of trusting the marketing, I decided to test it. Not one premium driver against another. That's the game they want you to play. Big name versus big name, 600 against 650. No, I went the other direction entirely. I bought 10 of the cheapest drivers I could get my hands on, and I set out to see whether the budget stuff was really the junk I'd always assumed it was. And what I found broke something loose in my head. Let me tell you what a launch monitor actually measures, because this is where the fog starts to clear. The single most important number for distance is ball speed. Not swing speed, ball speed, how fast the ball leaves the face. Everything else, launch angle, spin rate, they shape the flight, but ball speed sets the ceiling. 2 golfers with the same ball speed and the same good launch will carry the ball nearly the same distance no matter what's stamped on the sole. So the whole question of whether an expensive driver is worth it comes down to one thing. Does it give you more ball speed than a cheap one? Here's the answer nobody in a glossy ad will ever say out loud. It can't. By rule, it can't. There's a test the governing bodies run on every driver face before it's allowed in play. In the old days, they talked about it as COR, the coefficient of restitution, basically how much energy the face springs back into the ball like a trampoline. They set the legal limit at 0.83. Then, because faces got so good, they switched to a stopwatch style test that measures how long the ball stays on the face in millionths of a second. The limit there is 239 microseconds with a small tolerance of 18 more. Every driver you can legally buy, the $99 one and the $600 one, gets pushed right up against that same wall. Think about what that means. The trampoline can only be so bouncy before it's illegal. So the most expensive driver on the shelf and one of the cheap ones I ordered are both sitting at the exact same legal maximum off the center of the face. The manufacturer cannot make the ball come off faster on a pure strike, because if they did, the club would fail the test and never make it to the store. That single fact that the spring in the face has been maxed out and frozen since roughly 2008 is the thing they will never put on the box. But knowing the rule and feeling it are two different things, and I still didn't believe it in my gut. So let me tell you about the 10 drivers. And the moment my gut finally caught up with the rule book, I lined them all up. I won't pretend they were all household names. I had a Wilson launch pad, a Cleveland launcher, a Tour Edge hot launch, and I went further down the ladder than that into the direct-to-consumer world, brands like Lazarus and the Maltby heads from Golfworks that you can get for $150 or less. Then I dug out 3 older budget heads I'd hoarded over the years from Ram, Founders Club, and Pinemeadow. 10 heads, some new, some a decade old. I hit 15 shots with each, off the same tee, with the same ball, on the same monitor, on 2 different days to cancel out how I was feeling. And I logged every number like my life depended on it, because at that point I finally cared about the truth more than I cared about being right. Here's what came back, and it stopped me cold. On the shots where I caught it flush, dead center, the ball speed spread across all 10 drivers from the most expensive to the cheapest garage sale head was barely 3 miles an hour. 3. The Pinemeadow that I would have laughed at a year earlier was within a mile and a half an hour of the fanciest one in the group on center strikes. At roughly 2 yards of carry per mile an hour of ball speed, we're talking a few yards of difference on your best swing between the best and the worst driver I owned. And most of them were bunched even tighter than that. I want to be honest about what that did to me. I felt sick because I could suddenly see every spring, every pre-order, everybody I'd talked into a new driver, and I realized we'd all been paying for a difference that the rules of the game make impossible. Somebody was getting rich off my belief. Not because they built a better face. They physically cannot, but because they'd convinced me the face was where the yards came from. So if the face is capped and the ball speed is capped, then how in the world did 3 of those 10 budget drivers actually add distance for me while 7 did nothing? Because they did. The monitor was clear. 3 of them gave me real, repeatable extra carry. And the reason why is the whole game. Here's where it gets interesting. And here's where I started to understand what I'd really been buying all those years. The 3 drivers that added distance for me weren't the ones with the best face. They were the ones that happened to fit me. One had a shaft that was 2 grams lighter and a half-inch shorter than my gamer. One had a slightly higher loft that matched how I actually deliver the club now in my 60s instead of how I delivered it at 30. And one simply had more weight low and back in the head. So my mishits, and let's be honest, most of my swings are mishits, held their speed better instead of falling out of the sky. That's the secret they bury under all the noise about faces and speed. On a center strike, every driver is nearly the same. The money is in the misses. The real difference between drivers isn't how far your perfect shot goes. It's how much you lose when you don't hit it perfect. And the fancy word for that is forgiveness, measured by something called MOI, moment of inertia, how much the head resists twisting when you catch it off center. The rules cap that too at 5,900 with a tolerance up to 6,000. And guess what? Plenty of budget drivers are built right up near that same forgiveness limit. So the 3 that helped me weren't magic. They were fit. And the 7 that did nothing weren't junk either. They just didn't match my swing. The same way a $600 driver off the rack, in the wrong loft, with the wrong shaft, at the wrong length, won't match yours. This is the part that took me years and thousands of dollars to understand. You have never been paying for distance. Distance is capped for everybody. You've been paying for the chance that the club happens to fit you and then paying full price, whether it does or not. Let me put a number on what that ignorance cost me, because I think you deserve to see the real bill. Between my 40s and my 60s, I bought a new driver almost every year. Call it 14 drivers at an average of $400. And that's being kind, because the last few were closer to $600. That's better than $5,000 right there. And that's before I add the fairway woods and hybrids I bought to match, because they always sell you the matching set. When I finally added every club, every upgrade, every trade-in where they gave me $40 for a driver I paid $500 for, I crossed $11,000. For a game that, by its own rule book, could not give me a faster ball off the middle of the face than the driver I owned in 2008. Stop for a second and think about how many times you've stood over a ball at address, wondering if the club in your hands is the reason you're short of the green again. That guessing game is exactly what the Iron Clarity Complete set was built to end, because it maps the 4-iron family so you know exactly where your game actually lives instead of hoping the badge on the club is telling you the truth. It walks you through the fitting imperative, why grabbing something off the rack is always a gamble, and it exposes what it calls the loft deception, the reason your 7-iron probably isn't really a 7-iron at all. Here's something you can check tonight for free before you even open the book. Go look at the loft stamped on your own 7-iron and compare it to what a 7-iron measured 20 years ago. Then ask yourself why it changed if nothing about the game did. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. Every set of irons you own is already fighting these same hidden variables, the same way your driver has been fighting shaft length and strike location this whole time. Now let's get back to the driver, because once you see how this plays out with the face, you'll understand why fit beats badge everywhere in your bag. And here's the layer. Under that layer, the thing that actually made me angry once I saw it. The reason a new model comes out every single year isn't that they discovered new speed. They can't. The speed is locked. The reason is that a driver that can never actually get faster still has to feel new. So they change the paint, they change the name, they move away 2 millimeters, and they hire the tour player to say it's the longest one yet. It's always the longest one yet. It has been the longest one yet every year for 15 years, and somehow we're all still hitting it the same distance. That's not innovation. That's a subscription you didn't know you signed up for. Now, I can already hear some of you, you're thinking, that's fine for a guy about to buy a new driver, but I'm not spending another dime. I've got the clubs. I've got good, because this next part is the part I'd have paid $10,000 to know 20 years ago, and it costs you nothing. This is for you, the golfer who already owns the driver and isn't buying another one. Stay with me, because the biggest free yards I ever found were hiding in a club I already had. Go look at your driver, measure the shaft, heel to the end of the grip. I'll bet you it's 45.5 inches, maybe 46. That length is not there to help you. It's there to help the marketing. A longer shaft in a robot's hands produces a slightly higher swing speed, and higher swing speed is what they measure to call it the longest driver yet. So they build them long, because long tests well in a lab. But you are not a robot. For a real human, a longer shaft is harder to control, and it moves your strike away from the center of the face. And we already established the entire game is center strikes. Here's the number that changed my golf. Do you know how long the drivers are that tour players actually put in play? Not the length on the rack. On average, closer to 44.5 inches. The best ball strikers on earth, with all the speed in the world, choke down or build their drivers shorter than what they sell you, because they know contact beats length every time. They know something the ad doesn't tell you. A slightly slower swing that hits the center of the face will outcarry a faster swing that catches it off the toe every single day. So here is what you do this weekend, and it costs nothing. Take your current driver, the one you already own, and grip down 1 inch. Just choke down 1 inch on the handle and make your normal swing. That one change effectively shortens the club, tightens your control, and pulls your strike back toward the center. I did this on my own gamer after the test, and my carry went up 8 yards on average. Not because the ball came off faster, but because I started catching it flush instead of scattering it across the face. 8 yards free from a club I already owned and had almost replaced. And if you want to prove it to yourself the way I did, buy a can of that cheap foot spray powder, the odor stuff, for a few dollars, and spray a light coat on your driver face. Hit 5 balls. Look at where the marks are. I promise you they're not where you think. Most amateurs, especially those of us over 50, are catching it high on the toe, and that single pattern is bleeding off more distance than any driver on any shelf could ever give back. Fix the strike, and you unlock the ball speed you already paid for. Buy a new driver without fixing the strike, and you just paid $600 to keep missing the center in a shinier club. That foot spray test is the cheapest, most honest fitting you will ever get, and no salesman will ever hand it to you because it points the finger back at the strike instead of the product. So let's tighten the loop. The face is capped, so ball speed is capped. Forgiveness is capped, so the misses can only be helped so much. The real free yards are in strike location and shaft length, both of which you control for free, which brings me to the single most important thing I learned, the one I promised you at the start, the one I found buried in the actual test data that the industry would rather you never see. I went looking through independent robot testing, the kind of testing where a machine, not a human, swings every driver identically, so nothing but the club changes. The most respected one publishes a big driver test every year, ranking dozens of models by pure carry and ball speed with a robot arm. And I read years of it. And here is the finding that finally set me free, the thing I'd build a monument to if I could. Year after year, the gap between the number 1 longest driver and the number 10 driver, all of them premium, all of them different brands, is routinely around 5 yards of carry. 5. Across an entire field of the newest, most expensive drivers on the market, swung by a machine that hits the center every time. And in more than one of those tests, a driver costing a couple $100 finished ahead of the flagship models, costing 3 times as much, not behind them, ahead. Because when a robot removes the human miss, all that's left is the physics, and the physics were capped for everyone a decade and a half ago. Let that sink in. Even under perfect robot conditions, where the expensive club has every possible advantage, the whole field is separated by about 5 yards, and price does not predict the winner. Now put a human back in the equation, a human whose strike varies by a half inch across the face, and those 5 robot yards vanish completely into the noise of your own contact. Which means, for you and me, the driver we already own is almost certainly not what's costing us distance. Our strike is, our shaft length is, our loft is, and every one of those is fixable without spending what they want us to spend. That is the confession I needed to make. I was the guy who believed the face was magic. I was the guy who told his friends the new one was worth it. I was the guy who traded in a perfectly good driver every spring for 2 yards that were really 0 yards. And the truth was, sitting in a rule book in a robot test the whole time, in plain sight, just buried under 15 years of the longest one yet. Let me give you the plan, the whole thing, so you can walk away and use it this weekend. First, keep the driver you have unless it's genuinely broken or more than, say, 10 years old, and even then, understand you're buying fit and forgiveness, not speed. Second, spray the face with foot powder and find out where you're really hitting it, because you cannot fix a miss you can't see. Third, grip down an inch, or if you're handy, have the shaft cut down to around 44.5 or 45 inches and watch your center strikes multiply. Fourth, and this is the one that actually adds ball speed for older players, make sure your loft is high enough. Most of us over 50 lose swing speed as the years go by, and we need more loft, not less, to launch it high with enough carry. If you're playing a 8 or 9 degree driver because it looks like what the pros play, you are leaving real distance on the ground. Bump to 10.5, 11, even 12 degrees, and if your driver is adjustable, that change is free and takes 30 seconds with the little wrench that came in the box you probably threw away. And if you are going to buy fit, not badge, go find one of those budget drivers with an adjustable hosel and a light shaft, get the loft right, get the length right, and understand you are buying the same capped face as the $600 club for a fraction of the money. That's exactly what 3 of my 10 budget drivers proved. They didn't beat the physics. Nothing beats the physics. They just fit me, and fit is the only thing left that money can buy in a driver. I think about that Tuesday on the range a lot. 2 yards, $450. The moment I finally saw the curtain move, I'm not angry at myself anymore for believing it, because they are very, very good at getting us to believe it. And they've had decades of practice and millions of dollars to perfect the pitch. But I am done paying for it, and after today, I hope you are too. Here's the heart of it, the thing I want you to carry to the first tee this weekend. The distance you've been chasing in a store was never for sale, because it was already sitting in your hands, locked behind a strike and a shaft length nobody told you how to fix. You just got told, and that tells me exactly who you are. You're the kind of golfer who would rather know the truth than keep feeling good about a purchase that did nothing. You're not the guy standing in line for the longest one yet. You're the guy who wants his yards back on his terms, playing this game strong into your 70s and 80s without handing over $1,000 a year for paint. So do something for me. Go do the foot powder test and come back and tell me where your marks landed. High toe, low heel, all over the place? Tell me in the comments because I read them, and I promise you're not the only one who's about to be surprised by what that face looks like. And tell me this too. What's the most you ever paid for a driver, and how many yards do you honestly think it gave you? Be brutal. I already confessed my $11,000. Your turn. If this cracks something open for you the way that Tess cracked it open for me, come join us, because there's a whole group of us now who have stopped buying the hype and started buying the truth, and we're all playing better and richer for it. Subscribe and stand with the golfers who see through it, because the next thing I'm tearing apart is the golf ball. And I found out that the premium ball you're paying nearly $50 a dozen for is doing something to your distance that almost nobody talks about. And once you hear it, you'll check your own ball before your next round. I'll show you the number, I'll name the models, and I'll tell you exactly what I switched to. I was fooled for 30 years, so you don't have to be fooled for one more round. Go get your yards back. They were always yours. Before you go, here's what waits inside the Honest Fairway Club. This video was just the overview. Members get the full driver test data and setup fix, picking up right where I stopped. In there, you can ask me your own question, and I answer myself. Never a bot. You won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. It takes a minute, and you can cancel anytime, one click, no risk. Now that you know which driver adds real distance, let's finish the job. The right ball matters just as much. And I found one cheap ball that truly surprised us. That's coming up right now.